breaking news from NBC4.
Shock. It's devastating. I can't imagine how his family feels right now.
Columbus Blue Jackets forward Johnny Gaudreau and his brother Matthew hit by a vehicle and killed.
Hockey fans all over this country and others woke up to the tragic news of Johnny and Matthew's deaths.
And now this team and this city are mourning his sudden loss.
He was the star player who chose Columbus, and Columbus chose him right back.
I think he's really the first elite player that chose to be here.
I wanted to come here. I mean, it made me feel really comfortable with my decision to come here.
The death of Johnny Gaudreau dealt a crushing blow to the hockey world, but to his family, the grieving process lives on.
Neither one of the boys will ever get to, hold their babies or anything like that. So it is bittersweet.
In our exclusive conversation, you'll hear from Johnny's mother, Jane, her reflections on Johnny's life, and how they're using his memory to change the future. Hello, and thank you for joining us. I'm NBC4 sports anchor Whitney Harding. If there is one word I would use to describe Jane Gaudreau, it's generous. Since John and Matthew's deaths, she's been generous through her grieving, attending multiple tributes all over the country and into Canada. She's been generous through charity, trying to find a positive in the tragedy, and using the John and Matthew Gaudreau Foundation to help others. And she's been generous with her time, especially sitting down and chatting with me. In the next 30 minutes, Jane shares so much about what she's been through and continues to go through. We talk about the hockey season and watching the Blue Jackets and still being a part of the club, progressing through grief, finding a project, and will there be a wedding for her youngest daughter, Katie? But first, let's start off with some of the newest news, the newest Gaudreau. First, just thank you for doing this interview. I mean, I know it's been a whirlwind. It still is a whirlwind for you. But first, I want to say congratulations, Grandma, again.
Yes, thank you.
I mean, have you gotten to meet him yet?
We did. My husband was up in Vermont with his mom, visiting his mom, and Meredith called and said that, she was going to be induced. So I called Guy. He drove to New Jersey, picked me up. We went to Columbus. The next day she went in and had the baby, and we went there, visited the baby that day. It was kind of like a whirlwind, but it was, so worth it. He's so cute.
Oh, he is. How wild that he's the exact same size as John.
Yeah. And my husband said he looks just like John when John was born. But when I look at him, Carter, all I see is Noah. And Noah looked exactly like John. And then when Madeline had Tripp, Matthew's son, he was fair because Maddie was a little bit fairer than the rest of them. And I saw Maddie in them and I was like, are we just looking for that? Or, but, it's nice. My husband said, he just thinks it's some type of blessing where, we just, have the John and Maddie back. So, I said, whatever, helps us to get through this, that's good. So
that was kind of what I was going to ask. I mean, have those two little ones, I mean, obviously all your grandchildren are blessings. Every child is a blessing. But have those two just kind of helped a little bit in kind of a happy, sad way?
They have. I guess you would call it bittersweet. At times it's, we'll say, and we're so happy. I was so happy both girls did so well. But then, it's bittersweet because then I think of neither one of the boys will ever get to, hold their babies or anything like that. So it is bittersweet. But, when you just look at them, it's just so nice to just feel connected to John and Maddie that way.
How much have you been able to pay attention to the Blue Jackets season? I've been saying all year that this is, I think, one of the greatest sports stories going on right now that I don't think enough people are talking about.
It is. This year, Sean had signed. John was so excited to play with Sean. He was like, you know what, I want this to be I know this is going to be a big year. I have a good feeling about Columbus. He said, I need to be in the shape my first year. So he said, okay, I'll train you. And he said, all right, I'll give you a week or two, you get back a week or two, then we'll start, and John had called me and I said, where are you at now? And he goes, I'm coming back from the rink. And I said, I thought Dad wasn't there. He goes, no, I have to go on the rink and get conditioned before I can go out with dad because he will give me a really hard time. So I have to get myself conditioned before. And then when I go out, he'll think it's the first time and think like, oh, okay, he's not it. He didn't take off those few weeks as bad as I thought he did. And it was just funny. It was just like a typical like John and Guy kind of like going back and forth. But yeah, John had such high expectations for this season. And I feel like the coaching staff, the players, everyone, I know they want to do it for themselves and for the city of Columbus, but I think they also want to do it for John and our family. And I think that's just given them an extra push. And, and of course I try to think that, maybe John and Maddie have something to do with that, they're helping them. So.
One moment that stands out to me from this year is the entrance to the Stadium Series. What was that moment like for your family, seeing Meredith leading the team out for this momentous game?
It was amazing. Columbus has been so good to all of our family, and especially to Meredith and the two little ones out there. But I just thought it was just, it was a big game. It was something that they had wanted to do for years, and they still, I felt like, made it so much about John and Maddie and our family. And when we walked out and saw all the fans, it was just breathtaking. Even the fact where I didn't know until it was a few days later, but I had no idea that Detroit, they were even came out with the boys' different jerseys. When I was reading what they had done, I was just in tears that there's just so many good people out there, I mean, once they took off the jerseys, then it was like, let's play the game. Both wanted to win, but for, that period of time, they were with John and Maddie and our family. And it was really, just so nice to see and so awesome.
Are you ever amazed at the impact your two sons have had?
I'm always amazed. When we went out to the tributes, I know some of our friends or people that we met would say, is this too much for you? Like you've done so many. And I said, actually, I felt like it helped with our grief, because we would go out to the tributes and people were there to honor John and Maddie. And that just made us feel so good. They were also there to just talk to our family, and they were there to share stories. And I heard so many different stories of so many amazing things that the boys did that they never came home and said, oh, guess what I did? And it was stories that we would have never heard, because my boys would never have come home and said, oh, guess what? I helped this person today, or I went to the hospital and did this. And it was just amazing. You just don't realize that until something like this happened. And it was, it was so nice for those people to come out and, who really care about us and the boys. And that was, like I said, that really helped with our grief.
Coming up.
I want you to go to the mom's trip. All of us want you to be there. You deserve to be there.
And later, is there going to be a wedding? Welcome back. It's hard to believe Johnny Gaudreau only played here in Columbus for 2 seasons, because his impact on the club was and still is immense. He made Columbus a place that players wanted to come and that families wanted to put down roots. In our conversation, Jane said that Columbus will forever be a part of their family, as will the Blue Jackets. But she truly began to understand the depths of the Blue Jackets family this year when she got a phone call from Eric Goodbranson.
I had a call and it said British Columbia, and I was like, I wonder who this is from. I said, somebody hockey. I checked my messages and it was Eric, and he said, can you give me a call back? And I was like, and I looked, I was like, okay, so I wonder what that's about. So of course I called him back, and it was the mom's trip. And he said, Jane, I'd really like you to go. I want you to go to the mom's trip. All of us want you to be there. You deserve to be there. And I thought it would be really hard. And I was like, all right, well, I said, can I think about it, Eric? So I thought about it, because I didn't know if I could do it, but my 2 girls, my daughters and my husband, they were just like, just go. They mean so much to you. You already went to one Columbus mom's trip, and we had so much fun. And it was, there was a core group there that I'm really close to, that I still stay in touch with. I thought about it and I was like, I'm just going to go. I feel like if I don't go, I might regret it. and they were wonderful. Like everyone, the new coach was just, I had never met him. I didn't know him. He was just absolutely wonderful. When we were in the moms, all met and we were in the locker room, and he was kind of like, roasting a couple of the older players, and saying like to their, in a nice kind of way to their moms. And it was so cute. Everyone was funny, laughing. And then when he got to me, and I was like, oh, I wonder what he's going to say. And he was just so like, just saying how much he really wanted to meet John. He had met him once, and he said so much he wanted to work with him. And he started crying, and it was just like, then the whole room was crying. And it was just like, you could tell he was talking like from his heart. And he didn't really even know John, but it was just like, it was so touching. So, we're just so happy and blessed to have so many, wonderful people help us through this.
Absolutely. I'm so glad you went on that mom's trip. Was it, what was it, fun? Was it a relief? Was it just kind of the moments that you needed?
I was okay until I went back to the hotel room, because I hadn't really been by myself at all. And I think that's what I was worried about most. You do a lot of thinking. A couple times I got upset, but I felt like the moms knew even before I knew that I was going to get upset. Everyone walks out with their son, and I kept watching them, and I was like, oh, what are they going to do when they get to, and I was like, well, maybe they just won't have me go out. And then the coach came over and he said, I want a picture with Mrs. Gaudreau. And, and it was like, oh, it was like kind of a relief, because I was like, I didn't know what was going to happen. I didn't know what to do. And then of course, I got a picture with Boone, and then I got a picture with the other ones, and it was really nice.
Did you ever think that your family would just have this connection to Columbus, Ohio?
I did, because we are a very, very close family. So when I say we received an enormous amount of cards and flowers and gifts and letters, just that meant so much to our family and just helped us so much. And a lot of those letters came from Columbus and the fans and people, and even people in Columbus. There were a couple that weren't big hockey fans, but they just heard the story. And I think it's a story that, any parent or any wife or sister or never wants to have to go through. I knew that we would be back, and we've been back to Columbus this year. I lost count. I'd say at least 4 or 5 times. And it'll just be somewhere that, again, like Calgary became our second home, because the people are just so wonderful and warm and, thoughtful, that we will go back again.
Still to come.
They really lost 4 people, because their parents will never be the same again.
And next,
her advice was, Jane, find a project for you and it'll help.
One thing Jane Gaudreau shared with me off camera when we were chatting was that she's only been able to really start talking about all of this very recently. While she and her husband Guy, they've been very busy this hockey season with the incredible number of tributes for their sons and seeing those 2 new grandbabies. In many ways, they still felt stuck. Then Jane got some advice from a friend who had been through a loss herself. Find a project.
Sometimes it was an effort just to get out of bed. Her advice was, Jane, find a project for you and it'll help. And especially for me, because I'm older, so it's not like I have little ones to take care of. Like my daughter, Kristen, got back. She had to help with homework. She had to take to dance and softball and, soccer and different things like that. And I felt like Guy and I were just kind of like, kind of in limbo. One of my friends, one of the hockey friends, of course, who they came over every day, she had this idea and she ran it by her husband, and they said, we have this idea. How about we form a 5K and we do this, and in honor of John and Maddie, and all the proceeds will go to the playground.
An adaptive playground at the Archbishop Damiano School, a place that provides services to 135 students with multiple disabilities and is at the heart of the Gaudreau family. Jane and her oldest daughter, Kristen, work at the school.
My brother went there when he was young, and my mom worked there both John and Maddie volunteered there. Everyone's worked there, so everyone's had a part of Archbishop Damiano's school. So actually, it started, we were trying to build the playground for a few years. When my mom passed away, we said in lieu of flowers, if the donations could go to the playground. That was a couple of years ago, back in 2023. And then, of course, when John and Maddie, we were trying to think of, what we should do. And we said for our family, that's what, we wanted to help out the students and try to, help towards the playground. So I said, all right, this sounds like a good idea. I said, but I don't really think Guy or I or our family can really help much. I said, we're just not ready. Like, we just couldn't. They said, we'll take care of it. And they just got together and started with this committee. And each of them, brought like a little bit of expertise to it. Some were runners, some had done races, some were project managers. So everybody kind of brought what they could to it. And they told us about it. We were like, oh, that's great. And they were like, oh, it would be nice. Like if we had like 100 or so people, that would be awesome. Like, we'd get to see the people and we'd make some money for the playground. And they said, no, we're going to try to sell it out. And I was like, well, what's a sell out? They said 1,000. And Guy and I were like, yeah, we thought there's no way. And it sold out. Like, I forget how many weeks. It wasn't even enough time. Like we still have a whole nother two months almost. And, but I think it was just that so many people love John and Maddie. So many people know our family. And I think people just wanted to help us. And then there's other people that also, have a fondness of helping children with special needs or disabilities. So I think, you just had so many different people come into the mix. And then I would get like little notes on social media that would say, I'm in Columbus, I'm Calgary, I wish I could help. What can I do? And the committee came up with like a virtual, and the virtual is like just really taken off.
I assume you're going to do the walk, run, bike?
I am. My husband is going to do both. He's going to do the competitive 5K, and then he's going to do the next one, walk with his friends, his hockey friends. I'm just going to go for the second one.
Wait, you're telling me that Guy's going to do something competitive?
Oh, yeah, right. Yeah. Yeah. Everything's competitive. I said, you realize the second one when you're walking with your friends, you're supposed to stay with your friends. And he goes, yeah. He goes, but I'll still be timed. So
I'll still be one step ahead, just one.
Exactly. Yeah.
Still talk, but I'll still be first.
Yeah. Like everyone, I feel like that's a Goodyear trait. I think it started with his mom. His mom is truly amazing. I love her. She's just the sweetest person. But if you went to play cards or any game with her, it was cutthroat. And I was like, wow. And I said, I see where Guy gets it from. And then, of course, the boys, and then even the girls, like we kind of all, I feel like just lived it for so long. No one's probably as competitive as my husband. Like even the boys, like Guy is just so competitive. It's just like crazy. But the boys were right there with him.
Next.
That's always our question everywhere. Like, what about the wedding? What about the wedding?
Plus.
So many people stepped up and, just were there for us.
Welcome back. Finally, Jane said there is one question she gets asked all the time, and honestly, it was one of the main ones that I wanted to ask her. Will her youngest daughter, Katie, have a wedding? In the final part of our chat, Jane shared what's next for her and her family.
Is there going to be a wedding?
Yes, there is going to be a wedding. Katie wasn't sure at first. Shortly after everything had happened, she had come to Guy and I and said that she didn't think she wanted to get married. She said, I want to get married. I just don't want to have a wedding. It'll be too hard. It's really hard for our family. Like, yet when we in our own town, in our own state, like we don't go out to dinner. We don't do anything. I feel like, and I know the boys wouldn't want us to feel like this, but I feel like it's more of kind of as parents, and we feel a little bit guilty. We feel guilty for having fun and they can't. I'm sure it'll pass. And I'm sure this is what Katie thought. She'd say, how can I have a wedding without my brothers there? And I just let her, I said, just think about it. We're not going to make any decisions yet. I just don't want you to regret it. I don't want it to be a year from now, 5 years, or maybe when you have your daughter and your daughter says, Mom, what did you do at your wedding? What did you and Dad do? I said, I don't want you to ever think, oh, I didn't have that. Like, you know, we've all had so much taken away from us. And, you know, the girls, my 2 daughters especially, because they didn't just lose their brothers too. They really lost 4 people because they lost their parents, because their parents will never be the same again. And then added with, you know, the wedding, I said, Katie, just, you know, think about it. And then she thought about it for, it was probably about around Christmas. And she said, she goes, I think I'd like to have the wedding. And she said, but, you know, she didn't want to go back to the same venue, or definitely not the same hotel, because the hotel was where we got the call. So
that's always our question everywhere. Like, what about the wedding? What about the wedding? And I was like, and that tells you how great people are, because they're thinking about, you know, not just, you know, Guy and I and the girls. They're thinking about, like, you know, the big impact that had on Katie. I mean, it was hours before, you know, it was what was supposed to be such a beautiful day for our family just ended up being the worst day, you know, for any of us.
She deserves her day, and I'm so glad she's going to do it.
My last thing.
When it was Johnny Jr.'s birthday, and Boone Jenner dressed up as was it Donald Duck? I think it was Donald Duck.
I think so. Yeah.
How wild is it to see these players here, especially in Columbus, but Calgary, everywhere, but see these guys here just kind of take those kids in as almost their own?
Yeah, it's really amazing. But that's how the hockey world is. The hockey world is just amazing. And, you know, it started out with the Hollydale boys. And of course, they knew the Hollydale boys longer. So, you know, they were all the ones that were in their weddings and everything. But, you know, then I went to Calgary and it was the same thing. It was like a group of guys that just did everything together. You spend so much time. And then, of course, when we went to Columbus, it was the same thing. They're all so close to our family that when Katie's wedding, she was inviting them to her wedding as well. It's just like everyone's just so close, and they just did so much for us. And it was, you know, I was at such a difficult time that, you know, so many people stepped up and, you know, just were there for us.
Another thank you to Jane for spending so much time with me, and thanks to all of you as well for joining. We send our love and hope to the Gaudreau family, and we'll always stay updated with their lives. I'm Whitney Harding. Thanks for watching.